The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports. You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Scott Frost couldn't stay quiet about the Huskers on Tuesday at Big 12 Media Days in Frisco, Texas. He seemed to want to stay quiet about Nebraska, steered clear of it when speaking at the podium at the Big 12 Media Days event, said on the ESPN set that he had a little, quote, detour between his stints at UCF. Then he went into a conference room with a couple of reporters from The Athletic, Chris Vanini and David Ubben, and now everyone is talking about Scott Frost again and the ugliness that exists between him and his alma mater. Yeah. Connor, your thoughts?
So should we just lay this whole thing out, the quotes first? Because like you said, what he said on the stage, wasn't bad. As we predicted yesterday in the show,
fine.
He's going to get asked about it. He's going to make some sort of glancing reference to it, and try not to talk about it. But then, like you said, the day goes on, you get asked enough about it from various different people. And, then he said, right, he didn't want to talk about the last place, just same way he did in his opening press conference at UCF, referred to Nebraska as the last place, which once again, weird.
Just a little smug, yeah.
Weird, but I don't really have an issue with it. And I'll get to my real issue with this in a second, but let's get to the quotes.
Well, let me set it up and say, because I think there are some people out there, and I've caught a little bit of this on social media or in comments from our articles at The Athletic. Like, why don't you media just respect him and stop asking when he says he doesn't want to talk about it? Well, this is Scott's first opportunity at UCF in front of national media. He hasn't done a big tour or had all kinds of people coming into Orlando. His press conference there when he was reintroduced was in front of media from Florida who wanted to talk about Central Florida. So This was like the first test, and he was not coaxed and prodded. The quote that we're going to read here in a second came when Chris and David, and I have listened to the audio of this, asked Frost about his decision back in 2017 and how hard it was to leave UCF. Not necessarily, can you talk about Nebraska? Just remember that game.
Yep.
That game. Chris said, I was on the field at that game against Memphis, the double overtime game. And at the time, you knew, correct, that you were going to have to make this hard decision. And then Frost said, I always said I would never leave unless it was someplace you could go and potentially win a national championship. And I got tugged in a direction to go try to help my alma mater. And I didn't really want to do it. It wasn't a good move. And I'm lucky that I have an opportunity to get back to a place where I was a lot happier.
Yeah. He did. I mean, for the record, there was a lot of people, this is well documented. There was a lot of people who were saying, hey, look, man, you kind of, it's the right time. It's time for you to do this. And, this feels like the right moment for you to be the head coach at Nebraska. To which he agreed to and willingly walked into the Nebraska job. And as we've mentioned many, many times, it didn't have to be bad, but it was. But clearly Scott thinks that it was other factors that made his experience at Nebraska not as good as it could have been. So just to be clear here, I am not mad at Scott Frost because he said things about Nebraska and I feel the weird need to like blindly defend Nebraska. I mean because I feel like there's two sets of people. I'm not sure. But people are like, man, don't talk about Nebraska that way. You can't talk about Nebraska that way. Otherwise, whatever. That stuff doesn't bother me. People could say whatever. He could say whatever he wants.
Right. There's the don't disrespect us camp.
I am mad that he won't take any responsibility for and it's really not that I'm mad, it's that I'm disappointed. It's that I'm frustrated. I want him to mature. I want him to take ownership. I want that for him, but he's clearly not going to do it. I'm rooting for him to wake up. I'm rooting for him to kind of understand, have a more clear understanding of how exactly it went. We weren't inside the walls of when he was here, and I'm sure it was difficult, and he ran into a lot of things that were definitely out of his control. But I would really like to hear him say, man, that was a different version of me. That was 7-8 years ago, and I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And maybe looking back in retrospect, I wasn't ready, or something like that. But
even if you don't believe that, say it. Just own it, man. Yeah. Like you were 16-31. You went 5-22 in one-score games. It was one of, if not the most disappointing tenures for a football coach in this century of major college football. It's hard to find anything that had more build up and fell flat. Very, very few positive moments, good wins in that stretch. So good players. There were people and good people who came through, but they were never able to put it together. And that has to reflect on the person in charge. And when you're a leader like that and you continue on in your career to go lead another program, it reflects well on you as a coach if you are accountable, if you stand up and own your failures in the same way that you do your successes. And I think that's what you and a lot of other people are looking for from Scott in this moment.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care what he said about Nebraska. Obviously his relationship with Nebraska is always going to be strained. I think it'll be less strained once he just kind of, wakes up and sees it, a different way, the way that everybody else seems to see it. But maybe he goes down to UCF on the second stint and has success, and then he'll be able to say, at the end of it, maybe he probably won't, touch it this way, but at the end of that, he'll say, well, look, I was a great coach here the first time, I was a great coach here the second time, and I wasn't a good coach at Nebraska. So what does that mean? Does that mean I'm sometimes not a good coach, or is that a poor reflection on Nebraska? Everyone will say, oh, well, that's probably a poor reflection on Nebraska. But so we don't really, he will be able to have that, plausible deniability at the end of it. And he will be able to say, hey, look, this isn't my fault. But I just wish there was a little bit of like, hey, I could have done some things. I wish I would have done some things a little bit differently.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups all summer long, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions, fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out. It makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks.
Jalen Lott is an Oregon Duck. No other way to put it. Whether you watch his film, don't watch his film, read the recruiting ranking, read the scouting report, you're going to come to the same conclusion. This is one of the best athletes in the class of 2026, and he picks the Ducks over a pretty impressive other trio of schools, might I add. One thing that I've always looked at when setting my expectations for a recruit. There are a lot of different factors. Position he plays, how urgently Oregon needs him to progress to become a starting player in his career, what his profile is, what his highlights look like, scouting report, all that stuff. I look at who else was in the final group of schools going after him. And when you've got a Final Four, as Jalen Lott did, that includes Oregon, Texas, which is the state he's from, USC, and LSU, it raises the bar a little bit in my head, and I go, okay, this seems like he's that sort of guy. In the 24/7 composite ranking, he's a top 50 player in the country, number 5 athlete, top 10 player in the state of Texas. This is a great recruiting win for the Ducks, who have shown a propensity over the years to recruit any state in the country at any point in time for just about any position group. And for Oregon to go out and get this sort of win is a really good sign. Oregon hasn't won every single one of these battles this year. Brandon Arrington was a projected two-way player, is a 5-star projected two-way player from the state of California, went to Texas A&M. Well, Texas A&M wasn't a finalist here for Jalen Lott, but Oregon goes into the state of Texas and gets him to commit to the Ducks. So great poll for Dan Lanning. Will Stein tweeted out a GIF where he was excited. I think it had Will Ferrell in it or something or other. But it's just, I like seeing that sort of energy. It's fun. It's good. Coaches in around it. Kids clearly like that sort of stuff. By the way, the recruiting concerns, I think we can put those to bed. Oregon's back inside the top 10, number 9 nationally in the 24/7 rankings. Lott comes in with a composite ranking of just a shade over 97, which is bordering on 5-star status. So Ross Douglas and Rashad Samples reportedly involved here, as you would expect. Samples has got ties to Texas. He was big, even though he's the running backs coach, in landing DeCorian Moore from Duncanville High School. And for Oregon to be able to go and get a kid from Panther Creek in Frisco, Texas, pretty impressive poll there by the Ducks on the trail. So this is another great pickup for Ross Douglas, Oregon's new wide receiver coach, who's in his first full season at the role and has some pretty darn big shoes to fill. And Jalen Lott can really help do that. 6 foot, 176 pounds, probably going to play receiver. According to Gabe Brooks over at 24/7, if he were to play both ways, it would be a little bit more of a development, whereas immediately he has a better chance to make an impact at wide receiver. The interesting part of that, though, to keep an eye on here with Jalen Lott, is that going into next season, Oregon's wide receiver room, I mean, the running back room is good. The wide receiver room is stupidly stacked with young talent. Now, we don't know who's going to transfer out. Let's say, for instance, the only player not there from this year's room is Malik Benson because he's out of eligibility. I mean, let's presume for a moment that Evan Stewart comes back. I don't know how likely that is. It's definitely possible. And if he does, you also have to remember that Gatlin Bair's coming into the room next year. A 2024 5-star recruit serving a 2-year LDS mission. Next spring or fall will be his first time in an Oregon uniform. You've got DeCorian Moore. You've got Jeremiah McClellan, Jurion Dickey, former 5-star. Kyler Casper could be going into his final year of eligibility. And we'll see how much experience he's able to get this year on the field. So I wonder. I wonder about that when considering, I had somebody ask me, hey, does he project more as a receiver, defensive back? Will he really play both ways? Is he a Travis Hunter type? I'm hesitant to compare anybody to Travis Hunter. The frame for Lott compared to Hunter is similar, and he is listed as an athlete rather than just as a wide receiver. I think everybody pretty clearly sees a lot more as a wide receiver. Hunter, by the way, was 6'1", 165, and was also the number 1 overall player in the country, not just athlete or receiver. He was the number 1 overall prospect in the 2022 recruiting class. So I think you can compare guys stylistically and say that Lott's athleticism, which is immense, could certainly translate to either side of the ball. But then you go to that side and go, well, I don't know, where would he play immediately in the secondary? Who's he pushing out? You know, the highlights that he's got on his film are at the outside cornerback position. Well, Oregon's got a bunch of those. Is he going to come in and just beat Naeem Offord out for playing time, or Ife Obadegwu, or Jalil Florence if he comes back? Like, I don't know, a lot of options. This is a good problem for Oregon to have, by the way, that I could look at a guy like this and say, I don't know where he can make an early impact because there's so much talent. Is he as talented as any of them? Pretty much, yeah. Like, his athleticism is crazy. The straight line speed, I think, is where he really, really shines. And he's not a super big guy. He does remind me a little of Evan Stewart, body frame wise. He looks like him a bit on tape. They run a little bit differently, and I think Stewart is a more complete route runner. But Lott is a guy who shows the ability to take the top off of defense. He's got awesome ball skills, and he can make plays around the line of scrimmage as well. You get him the ball in space. He's the sort of guy who you could give the ball to on a pop pass, screen, bubble, anything like that. That's within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage or so. He's going to excel in that sort of role and also be a burner that can go over the top. I'll get Brian's thoughts on Jalen Lott and his film tomorrow on the show, along with everybody else Oregon's been getting recently. We'll get plenty of Brian tomorrow on the show, I promise. The one thing that, I felt like wasn't showing up a lot on some of his highlight reels were intermediate routes. He's got a couple, but mostly maybe it's because that's how he just wanted to package the highlights and that's the most exciting and whatnot. But it's a lot of deep shots and it's a lot of him catching the ball, making guys miss, and then showing the straight line speed. You give this guy a crease, he's gone. He is absolutely gone. Kind of a Devin Allen type. Devin Allen, but more refined at wide receiver is what I see here with Jalen Lott. And there's a guy who was a Texas 4A silver medalist as a junior in the high jump, going 6'10", and the long jump, 7.25. Yeah, like, athlete is the correct term. I think he's more receiver, but maybe Oregon wants to develop him, have him go both ways, Charles Nelson style. I don't know. We will see. After the recent surge in Oregon recruiting over this last week and the other players they're still in on or leading for, this class is still really small. What do you feel Oregon's chances are in finishing in the top 5? Admittedly, before this last week, I would have put this at about a 2. I'll bump it up to a 3, even though I know they're sitting number 9 in the country right now. I will defend my point here in a moment. In the last week, Oregon has landed 3 of their top 6 rated players in 24/7's rankings alone. Now, they have 3 5-star recruits with Emmanuel Hinacho and Jet Washington and Kendre Harrison. It's a good collection of guys. I mean, a really, really good collection of guys. We'll see if, one day I saw Messiah Hampton, wide receiver commit, tweet a while back about maybe getting bumped up to 5-star status. That has not happened as I'm recording this show. I don't necessarily expect it to. He's a really talented player that I'm glad Oregon's got in the fold either way. And boy, him and Jalen Lott, those guys complement each other really, really well. Because Hampton, I think, does do a lot of the intermediate stuff at a really, really high level. And then you put Gatlin Bear in the fold, who can kind of do everything. Future of that receiver room looking really, really good. So, back to the top 5 question. The reason I have this at a 3 is not because I don't think Oregon's going to get more players, because I think they will. They're sitting at 14 hard commits, so the class is indeed still small. However, what you have to remember is that just because Oregon's class is small does not mean that other schools' classes are going to fail to grow. Alabama's landed 2 5-stars and a 4-star in the last 10 days' time. They landed Jire Edwards, apologies if I don't know that first name exactly, who popped up on Oregon's radar at one point in time in the recruiting world, and he wound up at Alabama. Xavier Griffin, one-time USC commit, he went to Alabama. Like, Bama's done very, very well, and they are currently the number 5 class in the country with just 19 commits. If you look at the top 5 classes, according to 24/7, which is where I've just always been partial to with the rankings. I know everybody's got their own metrics on 3 and Rivals and ESPN and such. USC is number 1 with 31 commits. Georgia's number 2 with 27. Texas A&M is number 3 with 24. Notre Dame is number 4 with 25. They've been on a recruiting heater in the last month's time. And then Alabama is number 5 at 19 commits at the moment. So Oregon does have an incredibly high average recruit ranking. However, you have to get really highly rated players, and you have to have some volume if you're going to pull a top 5 class. And I know Oregon did last year wind up in the top 5, number 5, as a matter of fact. But that was really a top 10 class that got bumped up because of Jaren Kiave Sangopolatele, who committed to Oregon.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Look, they're saving you money already.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All the everydays today, we're going to do a little bit of a recruiting roundup to end the show. We're going to talk about guys like T.I. Mukais, Blaze LaVista, a couple other fun names to get in there because we want to make sure we talk about Rajon Duncan, who got a crystal ball to Washington on Monday night. And he's not the only guy who did get a crystal ball. As somebody who it's been back and forth, we've been like, oh, maybe it's Washington, maybe it's UCLA. Kind of feels like, whatever week there was a new leader between one of those two. But Washington has picked up a crystal ball from 247 Sports' Blair Angulo to land the nation's second highest ranked uncommitted running back in 4-star Brian Bonner.
The one that always felt like the longer it goes, the better it is for Washington. And I know it always kind of sounds like, oh, well, how do you know that? And it's like, well, UCLA's in his backyard. You got a running back, Deshaun Foster, as your head coach. So, there's all the reasons to go to UCLA if you were going to do that by now. But it's the relationship with Scotty Graham, the way that Scotty just kind of builds and hangs. Now, I didn't want to say hangs around because that's not really what it's been. I think it's
you're right.
But it's just been a case of hey, I'm not going to tell you when to commit. If you want to commit, commit. If you don't want to commit, hey, we're still good. But I'm not, if I take another guy like we do with Dre Pollard, I'm not saying, hey, we're not taking you, because Dre and Brian Bonner, respectfully, much different category. So I think, you take both guys plus Ansu Sanoe, you're more than happy for Scotty Graham.
So I had a rant that I wanted to go on about Dre Pollard later, but because you set me up so perfectly, I want to do it now. And it's something where I remember covering it in the bonus show, where this does not preclude taking Brian Bonner, where everything that we saw, following the commitment with Ansu Sanoe, saying, hey, this is the 1-2 punch and everything like that, that's all well and good. That's totally fine. But it's, as you said, it's exactly why you take somebody like Dre Pollard. It's, hey, this is just a really talented athlete who has the burst and all the speed that you're looking for from that high-end speedy running back. I hate that I use that word twice, but that's, that really is the best way to describe what his skill set is right now. And it's also the number one thing that Brian Bonner brings to the table. I like what he's able to do in open space. He's got a couple of nice juke moves that he's just, already, I don't want to say perfected, but has done a really good job of learning throughout the years and refining. But it's one of those things where he runs a 10.48. That's his personal best in the 100-meter on the track. So that's elite speed. That's faster than Dre Pollard, who was at a 10.67, I believe, this last season when he won the 100-meter state championship in Nevada. So you still can find a way to get faster and utilize both of those guys' top-end speed on your roster. And it's something where, like we've said, Dre Pollard has played a lot of receiver at Ed W. Clark. It was something when he first got the offer, you and I were talking about it as, is he going to play defensive back? That's the conversation we were having about this, because that's just the kind of athlete that he is. and you find a way to use that. And like I want to talk about it later with Blaze LaVista as well. You can still find ways to make sure that you're taking other targets at wide receiver, at corner. Like again, we'll get to later with Rajon Duncan as well, where this is just a guy where with Donovan Robinson, we saw it with Rashawn Clark as well. You take him as an athlete, you get him on campus, and then it's okay. Yeah, this is where we want to put you. And with a guy like Brian Bonner, who is a high-end elite talented running back, assuming this crystal ball comes to fruition, that's all you're doing is you're adding speed and skill to your offense.
And you're doing it in a way that doesn't preclude anything from already changing, like we've talked about, where you're looking at it and saying you don't have to go into a portal back. You don't have to do other things where Jed wants to build through the high school ranks. What better way to get a big bruiser, an electric guy, and two electric running back, in Pollard and Bonner, where you're looking at it and saying, okay, no matter who ends up coming out of this group in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever it ends up being, we're set. Like you're not worried about, oh, well, maybe now Ansu might leave, or maybe now Dre might reconsider things. No, they're all different types of guys. And in the Big Ten, you want to have different types of weapons to use. Like when you were running through that, I was running through the offense. I'm like, imagine you put, Audric Harris, Dre Pollard, Brian Bonner, and you just go put the track team out there basically. And imagine like Damon, like there's so many different. No, that's where my mind was cooking, and I'm thinking like, and the reason why I was doing it that way is it's like explaining it to fans. That's why you just continue to stack the talent. You don't look at it and say, "Oh, this is a concern because now you might push one of your other guys away." No, look at the room. You might as well just add one more back because you can do so many different things with them.
So this is something I've thought about for a while in terms of since like this Big Ten conference realignment, all this sort of stuff happened, where adding a guy like Brian Bonner, who I legitimately believe is going to play as a freshman, especially with, Jonah Coleman out of the mix where he'll be graduated and the room is going to be somewhat split between Adam Muhammad and Jordan Washington. I believe that Brian Bonner can find his way in there. But when you talk about what just some of these just groups of speedy receivers and running backs can look like at the college level, that's something that Big Ten teams have not built around, where this is by no means saying, hey, you can't go out there and stack the trenches along the offensive line or defensive line. That's still extremely important. But it's something that Scotty Graham talked about with us in the spring, where it's, we're taking these two different kinds of running backs depending on the personnel the defense is going to show us or how a certain other team has built their roster, where, this is a team that, they're ready to just stack the box and defend you coming downhill. We're going to put one of our speed guys in and run around you. And if they're going to spread the field on defense because they've got a lot of defensive backs that can tackle in space or do whatever, we're going to put our big 225, 230 pound bruiser in there and run through you. And it's, I'm not trying to say that this is otherworldly or anything like that, but it's just an interesting pivot, I want to say, because I don't think that this is unique to Washington either. I think it's something that USC and Oregon have also shown. And I say that because it's just an adaptation of bringing the Pac-12 into the Big Ten. And I think there are ways that you can make that work and utilize all this speed in a way that Big Ten teams, the top end, the Penn States, the Michigans, the Ohio States are still going to be able to contend with. But a lot of these other Big Ten teams have built their roster. Iowa is a great example. They've built their roster in a particular way for so long that you can find ways to out-strategize them by adding so much speed and just saying, you want to play like this, we want to play like that. We're going to force you to adjust to us, while on the other side of the ball, we're going to make sure that we adjust to what you're doing as well.
And it gives Jed so many different opportunities as a play caller. That's what because the school that came to mind was Penn State, like Nick Singleton and
Katron Allen.
Thank you. And then you talk about like building that out 2-3 years. You're not talking about, oh, hey, this is a portal big, 1 year kind of, let's see how this works. It's no, imagine doing that for 2-3 years in a row. And then that's why it's so important to stack this talent and do it in the high school ranks, because you can build that out and you don't have to then go back to the wishing well one more time. You can say, wait, imagine Brian Bonner as a sophomore after he's played 13 games with Jordan Washington, kind of in a reserve role. It's like, wait till Jordan and Brian are on the same team or on the field at the same time, maybe, and then you throw in Dre Pollard in that mix. And like now you really are starting to get kicking. And it's like, that's where the play calling stuff from Jed that we saw in year one, by year 3, we won't even be talking about it because he has so many different weapons. That play calling struggle is not even going to be able to be a thing.